Okay, so you've probably seen it all over the place, right? This absolute explosion in AI-generated video. I mean, just a short while ago, this stuff was, well, it was kind of glitchy, a little weird. Now, we're talking photorealistic scenes that are seriously shaking up the creative world. So today, we're going to look at how this incredible tool is changing filmmaking, and maybe more importantly, why it's putting our whole idea of creativity and copyright on trial. All right, let's get into it. All right, so here's the plan. First, we'll check out the tech itself, this new creative canvas. Then we're going to see how it's totally shaking up the workflow in Hollywood. After that, this is the juicy part. We'll dig into the big question of how these tools actually learn. And that, my friends, leads us straight into a huge legal battle. And to wrap it all up, we'll ask, what's next for creativity? Okay, so first things first, we really need to get a handle on just how powerful this tech has become. Because the jump in quality, it's not just impressive, it's been absolutely staggering. I mean, we've gone from a quirky little experiment to a full-blown professional tool in what feels like, I don't know, a blink of an eye. And this quote, it just nails it, doesn't it? We're so far past the point of saying something is good for an AI. The top-tier models are now pumping out content that, honestly, sometimes you just can't tell it from the real thing. And that, right there, opens up a whole universe of new creative doors. And it's not just a one-horse race. What's so interesting right now is that we have a real market here. It's not just one dominant tool. You've got the heavy hitters like Sora 2, which is all about that 4K cinematic look and mind-blowing realism. Then you have Runway, which is kind of the darling of creative professionals, for its awesome editing tools. And then there's Pika Labs, perfect for that fast, flashy stuff you see on social media. They've each found their own sweet spot. Okay, so you have these incredibly powerful tools out there. It's no surprise that Hollywood is paying very close attention. And let's be clear, this isn't some gimmick. This is fundamentally changing the nuts and bolts of how movies are made. Let's take a look at what that actually means on the ground. The first and honestly most immediate impact is just pure speed. I mean, think about pre-production. You've got storyboards, concept art, set design, all that stuff. Traditionally, that's weeks of work for teams of artists. Now, with generative AI, a director can dream up entire scenes, entire worlds in just a few hours. It's a massive, massive accelerator. And hey, where you save time, you almost always save money. A lot of money. Visual effects, VFX, that stuff is famously expensive. We're talking millions. But now, AI can automate some of the most tedious, labor-intensive parts of that process. And that can bring the cost of incredible effects down from the millions to maybe just the thousands. And that's not just good for big studio budgets. It's a total game changer for indie creators. So if we boil it all down, you're looking at 4 huge advantages here. We've already hit on the big 2, efficiency and cost savings. But then there's this idea of creative expansion, literally being able to create worlds that were just too expensive or technically impossible before. That in turn helps level the playing field for indie filmmakers. It's a huge deal. And finally, it's a great way to manage risk, right? You can use AI to pre-visualize everything, test scenes, find problems, and fix them before you ever start filming. Okay, this all sounds pretty amazing, right? Faster, cheaper, more creative. What's not to love? Well, there's a huge, huge catch. The magic that makes all of this possible is also the source of a massive legal and ethical firestorm. And to get why, we need to pull back the curtain and look at how these things actually learn. So at the heart of all this is something called a neural network. Now, don't worry, we're not going to get super technical. The easiest way to think of it is like this. It's a super-powered pattern recognition machine. You don't program it with rules, like a cat has pointy ears and whiskers. Instead, you show it a billion pictures of cats, and it just figures it out. It learns from an absolutely staggering number of examples. So how does that learning process actually work? Well, it's a few steps. First, you have data collection. The AI scrapes and swallows up millions, sometimes billions of images, videos, and texts from all over the internet. Then it breaks all that stuff down into tiny little pieces, kind of like digital atoms. And its whole job, its entire purpose, is to get really, really good at predicting which little piece comes next in a sequence. Every time it gets it right, that connection gets stronger. Imagine an art student who could study every single painting ever made. That's kind of what's happening. But, and this is the billion-dollar question, what if that student isn't just studying? What if they're making perfect copies of every single one of those paintings, without permission, just to learn? And that question right there is exactly what brings us to the center of this huge legal battle. See, the AI companies, they argue that this training process is perfectly legal under something called fair use. But the artists, the studios, the copyright holders, they are firing back hard. And now it's up to the courts to figure out who's right. So, here it is. This is the central legal question of our time, really. Is training an AI model on copyrighted data fair use? Now, fair use is this really important idea in US copyright law. It lets you use copyrighted stuff without permission for certain things, like commentary, news reporting, research. But does training a massive commercial AI model fit into that box? Nobody knows for sure. And the arguments basically boil down to this. On one side, you have the AI developers. They're saying their use is transformative. The AI isn't a giant copy machine, they argue. It's just learning statistical patterns to create something totally new. But then on the other side, you've got the copyright holders. They're saying no way. This is a commercial use, and the stuff the AI spits out could replace our work and completely destroy the licensing market. To figure this out, courts look at 4 specific things. Okay, factor number 1, and this is really the big one, the purpose and character of the use. The key question the court asks is this: is the new AI-generated thing truly transformative? Is it something genuinely new and different? Or is it just a fancy substitute for the original work? Next up, factor 2 is the nature of the copyrighted work itself. The law tends to give a lot more protection to something super creative like a movie or a novel than it does to something factual like a phone book. And since these AIs are training on tons of art and films, this factor, well, it often tips the scales in favor of the creators. Factor 3 gets into how much of the original work was copied. And this is where it gets really tricky for AI because, well, the training process often uses the whole thing, 100%. Now, the developers will argue that it's not actually saving a copy, but the fact is the entire work was used in the training. That's a tough hurdle for the fair use argument. And finally, the 4th factor is all about the money, the effect on the potential market. Does the AI's output hurt the market for the original work? And maybe even more importantly, does it wipe out a potential market? Creators argue that, hey, there should be a market for licensing our work for AI training, and by just taking it, these companies are causing real financial harm. So you've got this massive, complicated legal mess. The big question is, where do we go from here? Well, the answer isn't simple at all, and it really depends on where in the world you're standing. Just take a look at how fractured this is globally. In the United States, it's being handled case by case in the courts. The European Union, they've created a special exception for this kind of stuff, but, and this is key, they let creators opt out. Japan has a super broad exception that seems to give AI developers a lot of room to run. And then you have China, where a court has already recognized copyright in an AI image, but only if you can prove a human was really involved in making it. There is zero global agreement on this. But while the lawyers are busy arguing, the market is already starting to figure things out. To get around all the legal headaches, some AI companies are just deciding to pay up. They're partnering with companies like Shutterstock to license huge libraries of photos and videos. That way, they're building their models on ethically sourced data they actually have permission to use. It might just be the simplest path forward. And all of this leaves us with one last massive question. Is AI just the next great tool for artists? Something that's going to augment our creativity like the camera did for painters? Or is this something different? Is it a technology that's just learning from everything we've ever made, only to automate us right out of a job? The final chapter of that story, well, it hasn't been written yet. Something to think about.